Hey everyone, thanks for joining Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today I'm going to teach you how to play Red Rising. This is the newest game from Stonemaier Games. It is a 1 to 6 player game that takes roughly 45 minutes to an hour and a half to play. It is a competitive game where players are competing throughout the game to gain the most points and be the overall winner at the end of the game. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to play, starting with components, setup, player turns, endgame conditions, and finally scoring. If you want to check out a playthrough video, I'll have a link up in the top corner as well. And let me know in the comments below what you think of these videos or what other kind of videos you'd like to see around this game or other games that you're interested in me covering. I'm always open to conversation and love hearing from you. As always, if you find these videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider that like button, subscribing to my channel. It's one of the easiest ways you can support channels like mine so we can continue to grow and produce this content. If you want to stay in all my videos, also consider ringing that bell so you get notifications anytime I release new stuff. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you how to play. There's one custom 6-sided die included in the game called the Rising die, and it's going to have different bonuses on each side that you'll gain throughout the game when you have to roll this die. The first one we have here is to place 1 influence on the Institute. Then we have to gain 1 helium token, gain the Sovereign token or keep it if you already have it, advance your fleet ship 1 space, or if you turn it this way, blow your minds, it's an armored gnome, garden gnome. Oh, you will never get that out of your head. Next we have the Eye. This is when you reveal this, you're going to reveal the top card of the deck and place it, not deploy it, on any location. And then the final symbol is the Banish. This one you will banish the top card of any location of your choice. And I'll go into more detail about this later in the video. Moving over to the cards, there's a single deck of cards included in the game, which is going to be comprised of characters. And these are going to be broken down into different factions and colors. As you can see here, there are 14 different colored factions within this deck, and each one of these is going to be themed towards a particular type of character. For example, with blue, those are all going to be pilots, or green are going to be made up of programmers, orange are going to be engineers, or grays are going to be security, and many others. Each one of the character cards is going to list the name of the character on the top, along with the card's color and the character's cast. On the other side of the card is the number of victory points that card is worth at the end of the game, and then going down the side of most of the cards is going to be a visual representation of additional ways you can gain victory points, which are also listed at the bottom of the card. So with some of the cards, they will list a solid color or images of particular characters that you're looking for. Other cards will have X's through either solid colors or characters, and these usually reference that the card, if it is with those other cards, will get negative points at the end of the game. Underneath that is going to be the card's deployability, and most cards are going to have a deployability which will be triggered when the card is deployed. Other cards will have a block ability which will have the shield with the line through it, and you'll carry those out at certain points during the game as defined on that. Still, other cards will also have the little symbol here, which is going to be triggered at the end of the game, and this is usually done before scoring. Then each one of the cards is also going to again list additional ways you can gain victory points or other conditions that will get you victory points at the end of the game. Each one of these again will list certain criteria that you must meet, which is also referenced here in this visual representation of it. For example, this card we gain 15 points if it is with the Jackal or 2 other gold cards. So there is the Jackal and the other gold cards are referenced there. We'll also get negative 10 points if it's with Victoria or the Servos, and those are the 2 that are crossed out there. There are 6 different houses included in the game, and each house is going to have its own tile that'll have its own ability on it. Anytime a player gains or retains the Sovereign token, that house's ability will be triggered and must be carried out to the best of that card's ability. And there's a number of different ways this will happen throughout the game, which I'll cover a little bit more later. The final thing I want to go over before moving into setup is the board itself. So on the top of the board is going to be the fleet track, and throughout the game players are going to be moving their ships along this track, and at the end of the game they're going to receive victory points based on their position on the track. On the other side is the Institute, and this is the location where players are going to be placing their cubes throughout the game, and again at the end of the game the players are going to receive points for their cubes at this location. Next, we have the 4 different locations on the board that there'll be face-up cards in that the players are going to be interacting with throughout the games. And each one of these locations is going to have a particular bonus that the player will carry out at certain points, such as the Institute, where you'll be placing a cube, or Luna, where you'll get the Sovereign token, Mars will grant you helium, and Jupiter will let you advance on the fleet track. In the center of the board is going to be a spot for your face-down card deck and a spot for your helium tray. For board setup, the first thing you'll do is place the main game board out in the center of the table. Then you can go ahead and grab the deck of character cards, shuffle it up, and you're going to place 2 out face up on each one of these locations. When placing the second card, make sure you cover up everything except for the previous card's name and value of victory points at the end. Then you can deal out 5 cards to each player, and I'll set up for a 3-player game. All the rest of the cards can be placed in the middle on that spot. You can also place out the die somewhere on the board, as well as your tray of helium tokens. Next, go ahead and shuffle up the tiles and deal 1 randomly to each player. This will be their house's faction. So our player over here is going to receive Jupiter. Then we have and Mars. All the rest of them can be returned to the box as you're not going to use them. And then each player is also going to receive their quick reference guide based on their house's color. And you'll also give them their 10 faction cubes and their starship. From there, then each player can place their starship in the 0 location on the fleet track. And you'll also place out the sovereign token, and you'll also choose a player to be the first player, unless Apollo is playing, in which case then that player will always be the first player. Otherwise, you can do this in any manner you want to. You can grab 1 of the cubes of each player and have 1 player draw, and that could be the player that starts. I'm just going to go ahead and give it to our central player here. From here, then you're ready to begin the game. The one other thing I want to point out with setup is if you're playing a 2-player game, you're also going to take 1 of the factions that you're not using and place 3 cubes in the Institute. This will give a little bit of variety during final scoring. Red Rising is played over an undefined number of rounds. During each round, each player will get to take a turn, starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise around the table. During each player's turn, that player must perform 1 action from a selection of 2 possible actions, trying to build the most powerful hand of cards to get them the most points at the end of the game. This is going to continue round after round until the end game conditions are triggered, which there's 2 different ways the end of the game can be triggered. First, if 1 player has met 2 of these conditions, then that will trigger the end of the game, which are to have 7 or more helium, to have 7 or more cubes in the Institute, or to have their ship on the 7th or higher space on the fleet track. If that happens, then that will trigger the end of the game. The other way the game is going to be ended is if all 3 of those conditions are met by different players. And in either way, you will continue playing the rest of that turn so that all players have an equal number of turns. The one exception is if Apollo is being played as a house faction, then Apollo will always get to take 1 final turn after all players have had an equal number of turns. At that point, then you'll enter into a scoring round where everybody's going to total up all the points that they have for the game, and the player that has the highest amount of points will be the winner of the game. So let's go ahead and get into the game. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first player, and during each player's turn, that player must perform 1 action from a selection of 2 different actions. They can either lead or scout. So getting into our player's turn, let's go ahead and take a look at the cards that that player has. And from there, then that player must choose to perform 1 of those 2 actions. So the first action I'm going to talk about is the lead action, as this is the one you're going to be using throughout most of the game. With this action, it has 2 steps to it. First, you're going to choose 1 of the cards in your hand to deploy onto 1 of the 4 locations. With this card, I'm going to go ahead and choose the Jackal, and I will go ahead and place him on Mars. So anytime you place a card on a location, you are going to cover up the lower cards except for their victory points, name, and color. From there, then you're going to carry out your card's deployability unless it says that you may, in which case then you can choose whether you want to or not. But otherwise, you must try to carry out to the best of your ability. So with this one, it is to gain the sovereign token. So I'll go ahead and gain the token, adding it to my area. And then I also get to trigger my house's ability due to the fact that I'm gaining that sovereign token. So with my house's ability, it says begin the game with +1 card. Whenever you gain the sovereign token, even if you already have it, banish any 1 card from a location of your choice. At the end of the game, before scoring, banish 1 card from your hand. So this player should have started with an extra card, so I'll go ahead and add that card to that player, and then he's going to choose one of the locations to banish a card from. And one important note with this is that you're always allowed to look at any of the cards on any of the locations. You just cannot change the order of those cards. So if you want to see what a card is underneath another card or see what kind of abilities it has, you can do that at any point during any player's turn. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll banish this card here, adding it to the banish pile, and that can be anywhere you want it to be. You just make sure that you know where that banish pile is, and then they can carry out the rest of their turn. So at this point, then now that he has taken care of that, then he's going to go into the second step of the lead action, where he's going to choose a card from one of the other locations to gain, except for the location he placed his card on. So I can choose to gain one from Jupiter, Luna, or the Institute. And whichever location I choose to gain a card from, then I'm also going to carry out the ability that I would gain from that location. Again, with the Institute, I get to place a cube up in the Institute. Luna, I would gain the Sovereign token or retain the Sovereign token, triggering my house's ability again. Or with Jupiter, I would move one space on the fleet track. So I think I will gain this card here, adding it to my hands. And then since I chose that card, I will also activate the ability on that location, which is to move my ship one space forward on that track. Now, the other option I could have had if I didn't want any of the cards at one of these locations, so let's go ahead and take that back and say that I didn't carry this out. I could choose to blindly draw the top card of the deck and gain that to my hand. So let's go ahead and do that instead. And then I would roll the rising die and gain whatever benefit comes up on that. So with this one, I would gain 1 helium instead. And that is your lead action. Now, the other option a player has as an action they can perform is the scout action. With this action, according to the rulebook, this is one that you're only going to usually take if you're completely satisfied with your hand, but I've also found that you may want to take this action if you really just don't like the cards out on the field and there's nothing that you really want to gain that's going to be of any benefit to you in the short term. So with this particular action, instead of deploying a card from your hand, you'll simply be able to draw a card from the face down deck and place it in one of the locations. Now, you are not going to trigger that card's deployability by doing this, but whichever location you place it on, then you'll gain the ability of that location. So for example, with this card here, let's go ahead and say that I did a scout action. I'll draw the top card, so that's this, and then I choose one of these locations. So let's say I place it on the Institute. Again, you're going to cover up all the previous cards except for the victory points, name, and color. Then you're going to carry out the ability of that location. And again, with the Institute, that's going to let me place one of my cubes up in the Institute area. From there, that'll trigger the end of that player's turn, and it'll move over to the next player to take their turn. So let's look at one more example of this. So let's go ahead and go over to this player and see what they have. All right, so we have all kinds of stuff. Let's go ahead and use this card here. And with this one, I'm going to go ahead and place it at this location, and it says that as its deployability, I'm going to banish the bottom card of this location if it's not this card, which the purple or the pink card is the bottom card of that location, so it'll be banished. And then again, I will choose what I want to do as part of that lead action. So again, I could either gain a card from one of the locations I did not play a card on or deploy a card on this turn, or I can do a blind draw and roll the die. So with this player, I'll go ahead and gain this card here. And then because of that, I get to move my ship one space forward on the fleet track. From there, that'll end that player's turn. And let's move over to this player and take one more. So with that player, I am going to go ahead and do this one here. So I will place this on, let's go ahead and place this one over here. So this one says that I'm going to advance twice on the fleet track. So that's the red player, so I get to move twice. And then all other players get to move once on that fleet track. So then I'll move each of the other players up once. And that is the deployability on that. And then let's go ahead and say this player doesn't really see any cards that he wants to gain. So he's simply going to do a blind draw off the top of the deck. So he'll gain that one. And then he's also going to roll that die and see what he gets. And it's the eye. So with the eye, that one is going to reveal the top card of the deck, and you're going to place it on any location and not trigger its deployability. So he's got this one here, so let's go ahead and cover up that other card there. Again, it's simply just placing it out. You're not triggering its deployability due to that effect. And then this is going to continue going from player to player. Now, before moving on, there's a couple of important notes I want to point out as listed in the rulebook. So first off, if a card or anything else instructs you to gain a card from a location, you do not also trigger that location's bonus. The only time you're ever going to get a bonus from a location is carrying out one of the actions that I already listed, either the lead action or the scout action. Another important thing is that some of the cards are going to tell you or let you gain another card and then end your turn. So for example, with this card here, if we look at the developer, this one says that I may gain any other card from this location. If I do, I must end my turn. So with that kind of an action, if I choose to use this, then I will not be able to gain the additional steps of the lead action. So the second part of the lead action where you make that choice, you will not carry out. You'll simply end your turn immediately. So if we look at an example of this, let's go ahead and say that I place this card here and that I can gain any other card from this location. So let's go ahead and say that I gain this card instead. And because I carried out that action, that'll end my turn. It'll move over to the next player and I won't be able to carry out the rest of that step. Now I can choose not to, as that particular type of deploy ability says that I may. So I don't have to. I can carry out the lead action as normal. And a couple other things with deploying cards. So first off, if a deployed card lists another location, that would be any location but the location you place that card on. Another thing is that if a card instructs you to deploy another card, you will go ahead and do that and carry out that card's ability, but you're still only going to trigger the second part of the lead action one time. So you would not be able to gain that lead action twice as well. You'd only be able to do that once after you've carried out the other deploy. And there's a couple other things that are covered in the rulebook. Definitely reference that just to be sure if you have any other kind of questions that come up with odds and ends of that. Okay, so I played through more of the game, and at this point, let's talk about endgame conditions again. I kind of went over them earlier, but let's go ahead and cover them one more time. So again, the game is going to end in one of two different ways. If one player has met two of the endgame conditions, or if all three of the endgame conditions have been met by all the players, which again is if one or more players has 7 or more helium, one or more players has 7 or higher on the fleet track, and if one or more players has 7 or more cubes on the institute. So we're almost there with our players. Our player over here has the 7 helium, and we have 2 players on 6. They're very close there, and we do have the gold or the yellow player with the cubes in the institute. So let's go ahead. It is blue's turn, so let's go ahead and have blue take their turn real quick. So with that player, they are just going to scout as they're happy with the cards in their hands. So he's going to place that here, and that'll let him move up on that track. 1, and then it's going to move over to our red player to go, and the red player is going to do the same thing, and he will place that here so he can gain one of these. And that is going to, our blue player was the one that triggered the end game because we had 7 here, we had 7 or more here, and then he moved into there. So he triggered the end of the game. The red player was the final player to take their turn. As Apollo is not being played, we're ready to move into the scoring step. And for that, there is a scoring pad, and you simply will just work your way down through that pad. And I'll take you through that process real quick just to cover our bases. So moving into scoring, the very first step is to trigger any endgame abilities that are on your cards. You'll do this with the first player and then move on to the next player so that all players have had their chance. And each player will carry out all of this at one time. So let's go ahead and start with our player here. So we do have a endgame ability here, which with the all orange cards lets you change the name of that card. So if you need a particular named character for another card in your hand, the orange cards are really handy for that, as you can count them as any name on any card. So I have that. I also have one gray card, which the gray cards also work the same way. With these, you can treat this card as any one color other than gray, or in addition to gray. So this gray card will count as gray, and then another color of my choice. So in order to determine what I need for those, let's go ahead and look at my other cards here. So I have this gold card here, which says that if I don't have either the sovereign token, which I do, or if I have the other named character, then that's going to be -30. I do have the sovereign token, so that is going to be worth that. Then I have this one here, which is going to give me 5 additional helium, or If I have at least 5 helium, then I get those points for that one. And then this one here, I get 10 points if I have a red, and 10 points if I have servo. So with that one, I can count this card as having the name servo, and then this card I can count as being a red card, so I can take full advantage of all those points. So from there, let's go ahead and total up the points for these cards. So first off, I have 30 points for this card here. I'll have 12 points for that one, so 42. Plus, I do have at least 5 helium, so I will get the additional 18 points for that. So that'll put me up to 60. Over onto this card here, I have 25, so that's 85. And then I do have this card counting as the red card for 95, and this card will count, or this card is going to count as a red. That'll be a servo. So that's 105. Then over to this one, that's 120. And with this one, it says if it's with a gold, which it is, then it gets in that, so that's 130. And if I have no obsidians, which I don't, is another 10, so that's 140. Onto my final card, that's another 10, so that's 150. And for each gold on all locations, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 additional, so that's 25 additional points, so that's 175 total. So that player will have 175, and then we move over to the next player to handle theirs. Now that I've gone through all of the players, we're going to move on to the next step, which is the fleet track. So each player is going to receive points based on their position on the fleet track. So our blue player is going to get 28 points for that. The red player will have 21 points, and the gold or yellow player will receive 3 points. He was not very good with the fleet track. Next, each player is going to receive 3 victory points for each helium that they have. So our player here has 8, so he will have 24. Our player has 5 there for 15, and 15 as well for there. Over to the sovereign token, you get 10 points for that, so yellow will receive 10 for that, and our other players don't have it, so they don't get anything. Over to the institute now, the player that has the highest number, or the players that are tied for the highest number, will receive 4 points per cube that is on there. So gold has the most on there, so each cube is going to be worth 4, so 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28 points for the yellow player. Next, the next highest player or next tied highest players will receive 2 points per cube. So both red and blue are tied, so they will each receive 6 points for theirs. And anybody else or any other players would receive 1 point per cube after that. Finally, each player is going to receive negative victory points if they have more than 7 cards. So our player here has 5, our player there has 5, but our player over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So our player down there, our red player, will receive a negative 10 points for that. And the other players are not affected. From there, you're going to total that all up, so I'll go ahead and do that off camera, and then we'll come back and see who was victorious. All right, so after totaling everything up, our yellow player ended the game with 256. The blue player came in dead last at 184, and red had 218. So our yellow player is the winner of this game at 256, but red was right behind them. Well, not too far behind them. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos and leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it and take into account everything you say to make the best possible videos. Until next time, I'll see you later.